I would say the main difference between travel as pilgrimage and travel as tourism is, your own sense of why you're going, first of all. For tourism, there tends to be perhaps an interest in a new place, or you have seen it on television and it intrigues you and you want to make sure you get there, sort of 100 places to go before you die, that kind of idea. Pilgrimage is much more about setting a spiritual goal and traveling with an open heart sort of toward that destination, toward that goal. It's often to a place, but it's a place that has great meaning and has drawn thousands of people over the years. So on pilgrimage, you're also walking in the footsteps of many, many other people who have had a similar spiritual goal. I do think pilgrimage historically has been created, if you will, for sort of normal people. You don't have to be committed to the monastic life or to be a spiritual athlete, an ascete to go on pilgrimage. In fact, it's just the opposite. It seems to me that in Islam, for example, that's a very good example where people who practice Islam will go on what they call the Hajj, and it's one of the things that they need to do as a spiritual practice at some point during their life. So people come from all over the world to that pilgrimage site and walk around the Kaaba, all dressed in the same way, because pilgrimage is a leveling practice. Everyone is the same on pilgrimage. So you could be walking next to someone who's a king or a queen, and you would never know any of those differences. Degrees don't matter. Everyone is walking together on pilgrimage. And then the other beautiful thing about the practice of pilgrimage is that these historic practices that are part of pilgrimage can be practiced in our day-to-day lives. We don't have to fly around the world, for example, to go on pilgrimage. We can cross thresholds with great intention in our daily lives. In fact, I have just some thoughts here about why people go on pilgrimage. Some are seeking inspiration, some desire a new perspective or a change of mind, some are studying various spiritual paths, some are learning methods of meditation, some are doing penance, some are looking for a new song to sing. They're looking for inspiration about poetry they're hoping to write. Some are just simply curious. Some need to get out of their normal daily routines in order to experience some kind of transformation in their life. And that can happen anywhere. I think the practice of pilgrimage, or the practices of pilgrimage, relate to weekly worship beautifully. In fact, you could frame the worship experience as a pilgrimage, which I do in my book, Reinventing Sunday. I talk a lot about the idea of worship as a journey and use the practices of pilgrimage to move through the worship experience. But if you simply see the three movements of pilgrimage that I've identified over the years as I've done this work, the first movement, intentional preparation; the second movement, mindful experience; and the third movement, purposeful integration, then you could see how worship fits into that threefold pattern, because we each week prepare to offer our lives to God authentically in the act of worship, of corporate worship. So there's this intentional preparation. Then we really show up in the experience of worship and give our lives to God as authentically and genuinely as we can, to really be present in the experience. And then following that hour of worship, or whatever it is, that experience of worship, then we integrate the experience, how God has spoken to us, transformed us in the experience, and we take that into our daily lives on purpose. We make changes on purpose. So this idea of purposeful integration of the experience. So in that way, I think the three movements of pilgrimage fit beautifully into weekly work. You actually do find pilgrimage in the Bible. It may not use that word necessarily, but if you look at the sweep of God's people, in terms of the movement of God's people throughout Scripture, you could easily say that we're nomadic as the people of God. And you could also see instances where we were on a pilgrimage. For example, the Exodus from Egypt could easily be seen as a pilgrimage because of this sense of dependency on God and on each other through the wilderness, but moving toward this goal of the promised land, this place of aliveness, this place of new birth, which is really, in essence, what pilgrimage is about, is moving toward that place of spiritual aliveness and new birth. Also, I think the journey of the Magi is a great example of pilgrimage, where they saw the star, they had a vision, they set a goal, and then they were mindfully present along the journey. And then their purposeful integration after their pilgrimage, because they'd been changed and they'd had a dream, they went home by another route. So often on pilgrimage, our lives are so changed that we sense, in a sense, go home by a different way. We become new.